Thank you all for being here. Jennifer is not on the phone yet, is that correct? But she might be later? She's not there. Okay. So hopefully, we're hoping she can get a good connection. So in that case, I would entertain a motion to approve the order of the agenda with the HR addendum. Ellen?
I move approval of the agenda as presented with the HR addendums.
Second.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same. Motion carried. And we are at staff reports with Dr. Schatz, starting us off.
Thank you. As I had promised in the past, the report of the external review team for the Fargo Public Schools Advanced Ed visit has now been given to us and was provided to you in your board packet. And so that has been presented to you. The memo that we put together for this just outlined again the powerful practices which we've talked about before, so everybody's aware of that. And then the two improvement priorities, which was to conduct a thorough audit of all district assessments, including locally generated formative assessments, to determine the value of each and implement a monitored systematic model for data to inform daily instruction. And then the second one, develop and implement a process to evaluate the effectiveness of all programs, services intended to meet physical, social, emotional, educational needs of students. So those are two things that we're looking at, and Dr. Gross will be working with his team, and we're looking to have that to become part of our operational plan as we try to figure out exactly what those models might look like when we respond to those two improvement priorities. What I wanted to show you, though, and I'm going to stand up here real quick, turn on a microphone and do this very quickly. Sorry. Kirby said I shouldn't do that. All right, so again, with our website, what we've done again, as you know, with the strategic plan, and we get to this point where the dashboard that we put together, we're going to use this tonight. Bob's going to also use this with his report. But if you go to the far right, the seventh, right there, this is where we will post our overall report. So if, Bob, you want to click on, let's click on the schools one. For instance, you know that in our district, we not only do the every 5-year district-wide advanced ed improvement process, but we also have our schools doing that independently. And so as those schools complete their reports, this is where they'll be posted. So anybody could go and click on to one of those, and the ones that are highlighted are the ones that are in there now. Those are past ones. The ones that were finished up this past year, they're still finishing those up. They'll get uploaded. And then also, then Bob, if you go back to the menu on that. There you go again. You go up to where it says district accreditation, click onto that. You can see in 2011, that was our last quality assurance report. Stephen DeRoe has been unavailable this week, so we were hoping to have this loaded up for tonight. But he will then load this report on there, so we'll have a historical perspective then too of the different 5-year cycles that we've been using. So again, this dashboard is what we're using now for our results part of our overall strategic plan. So anybody could go in and read the report, see all the different recommendations and things that were made in there. And so I just wanted to quickly point that out to you again, and I know Bob's going to be referring to this in the second report that we have. So having said that, if there's any questions with regard to the report, we'd be more than happy to try and address those.
Anyone have any thoughts or any questions? Well, thank you once again. It's nice to receive the complete report and for showing us how to find it online. So then, academic performance, Dr. Gross?
Thank you very much. This evening, what we'd like to do is share with you information around Result 1 or Strategic Initiative 1, Student Achievement and Growth Monitoring. And to do that, we're going to share two different sets of data. One will be from the strategic plan dashboard so that you have another opportunity to see some of the information that we've been collecting. Also that the community will be able to see how to access that information that's readily available to all. And then secondly, what we want to do is just share some building initiatives that are going on across our system. We have chosen 3 initiatives, 1 elementary, 1 middle school, and 1 high school. That doesn't mean that those are the only initiatives that are going on. We have initiatives in every building. And these were just chosen to give you an example from the 3 different levels at which we have in our system. Many of them are being duplicated or replicated in the other buildings as well. So as we go through these are only identified just to share some information with you of how our staff are using data to move forward. So with that, just want to reference you to that strategic initiative number 1 that talks about, as a result of the Fargo Public Schools effort, our students will meet or exceed individual learning goals towards the achievement of district standards and benchmarks for academic proficiency in all content area. So that's what we'll be talking about tonight. When we look at the strategic plan dashboard, I'm just going to share 4 different pieces of data with you. Those around the ACT, that's an assessment that many of our high school students take, the benchmark reading assessment that's predominantly at the elementary level, and then 2 that go across all levels, the measures of academic progress and our North Dakota State assessment. So those will be the data sets that we'll look at on the dashboard. When we get to the building initiatives, like I said, I've just chosen 3 of them. One elementary, McKinley, the north side of our town, one in the middle in a middle school at Carl Ben Eielson, and one at Davies High School, so that you get a sense of what our staff are doing with the data to make a difference for the students and the parents that they have the opportunity to serve. So with that, I'm going to quickly switch over to the same dashboard that Dr. Schatz was referring to just a few minutes ago. And I'd like to pull over to the far left-hand side and get to that pull down under achievement. You can see that there are multiple goals under achievement. These are all aligned to our strategic plan. The data sets that we'll be looking at tonight are all under goal 4 under assessment. And the first one I'd like to draw your attention to is the one around ACT, or the American College Testing. This is an assessment that students at our high school take, and if anyone who is watching this or comes to our strategic dashboard would like to know more about this assessment, on all of the different pages there is a yellow button that says Learn More. If you click on that, what you get is a very quick synopsis of that assessment. You can see that it's given to grade 11 students across the state. And then it also talks a little bit about the results, how the results are given in benchmark scores. And they are then to be reflective of if a student meets that benchmark in the subtest, they have a 50% chance of getting a B or higher, or a 75% chance of getting a C or higher in that corresponding credit-bearing class once they hit that 4-year college or university. So as we go through the different pages of our dashboard, you'll see that information is available for all of those different assessments, and I think it's a very handy way to get that information. To start with, I'm just going to click on the first link here, which is our ACT benchmarks. What we have done is we have loaded the most recent data that we have. We're still waiting on one more data set. But what you will see is the data is broken into the 4 subtests, with the 2 on the top being English and then math, the 2 on the bottom being reading and science. And then you can see by building the percentage of students who met that benchmark score. And you can see that then over time. If a person is interested in only one building, this is set up so that I can, for example, remove the other buildings and just focus in on a particular site. Maybe I'm a parent at one building and I only want to see that. They have the ability to manipulate the data to see where they're at and where we are at as a district. So that is that first piece as we talk about our ACT benchmark assessment. The second set of data around ACT, there we go, is trend data. This looks very similar to the last set of data that I shared just a minute ago, but what this is the composite score, combining all of those subtests together and then giving you that trend history of where we're at as a district and as at the different buildings across our system. So if someone was interested in that composite score, that too is available. At any time, if an individual in our community has questions about the data, they certainly could contact the district office or they could contact the buildings and they could help them with that as well. And then finally, the last piece that we have is one that I don't know how many people might like to look at, but I think this is very interesting. And this is the ACT counts. So how many students by each year scored at that level? So by hovering over, I can simply see in 2004 the number of students who had that scale score. And you can see the shape in which that curve is created, and that's pretty similar for our district, other districts across the state, and other districts across the country. So a nice way to get that information about where we're at with that ACT assessment. The next piece I'd like to share with you is if I stay under assessment and I move to the benchmark reading assessment. This is an assessment that is done at the elementary level that really looks at reading accuracy, how students self-correct any errors that they might make as they are reading, the comprehension of a student, and the fluency at which they can read a passage. Again, there is the Learn More button on the top that you could click on, but in this case, you'll notice that we've actually provided a sample of if a parent or a community member wanted to see what that assessment looks like. This is what the teacher has in front of her or of him. The student would have the reading passage, and then as I listen to the student, I am then marking any errors that they might make, the self-corrections that they might make as they read through this passage. And then at the end of the short passage, I look for how accurate they were, how many times they self-corrected themselves. There is a quick rubric or a key on how fluent they were, from a 0 meaning they were word by word and was pretty slow, all the way to a number 3 where they're talking in meaningful phrases or reading in those meaningful phrases. And then lastly, I'm looking at the number of words that they are reading, so their frequency. So that data then helps us as we look across the system to say, how do we group our students in the elementary level for small group reading instruction? How do we provide that right text for some of the students to help them take that next step as they move forward? As we look at the data that we collect then, I'm just going to go to the district. But on our dashboard, you can see an individual could go to any one of our buildings if they wanted to see that data. But I'm going to go to the district, and I'm just going to choose second grade. And then I will hit the submit button. What I will get is 2 sets of data. Over on the right side is the data that tells us what is the percentage of students at that grade level who are proficient on that assessment. So you can see here that 81% in the year 2015. But what this also does, along with providing us the trend, is if I had questions about how are the students, for example, who are male doing compared to those who are female, I can begin to lay that on top. So we can ask those questions. Or if I had a question about students who might be in special education and be on an individual education plan compared to those who may not be, and so on and so on. So staff, parents, and building teams have that data at their disposal to say, here's what it says, what are we going to do to move forward? And the 3 initiatives that I'm going to share with you at the end are examples of buildings doing just exactly that, looking at the data and saying, what are we going to do to help our students and our staff move forward? Over on the left-hand side, what we have done is we have come up with a formula that calculates the number of students who have made 1 year of growth on that assessment. Because some students are starting below proficiency, some at, and some above. We want all students to make at least 1 year of growth. And this then is that trend over time of what percentage of our second graders in the district, because that's the data set I'm looking at right now, are making that 1 year's growth. And that data then is used by teams, for example, of grade level teams, or a special ed teacher, or an EL teacher, as they talk about what can we do to help our students be as successful as possible. So as we go through the benchmark reading assessment, that is available for most of those grade levels by building with that same set of data. Then I'd like to move into the MAP, or the measures of academic progress. And if you'll notice, there are two different links to MAP data. And the reason for that is with our new state assessment. In the past, our measures of academic progress, or MAP assessment, was aligned to our state assessment, so that we would know if a student took that assessment, they were very probable of being proficient on the state assessment. Well, when the new state assessment came to be, it was written at a different rigor level. And I think we've talked about that in the past, and that has been out in many ways. So with that came a new norming cycle. So instead of confusing the data, we basically separated them. One that was normed with the old assessment, and one that is normed with the new assessment. So I'm going to start with and just like the other examples, there is a learn more. This talks or gives the information about what that MAP assessment is. It's an assessment that we give to our students in grades through 10. I take that question, and based upon if I get it correct or incorrect, that next question then is dynamically designed for me. So if I get it right, I might get the same level of question, a few in the row, and then finally it might go up a little bit in rigor level. If I get a few in a row that are wrong, that next question might be a little bit lower in rigor level. So it's dynamically developed for myself. And this narrative talks about then why there are two sets of data, and the second paragraph talks about the renorming with that new assessment. But if we look at the data around MAP, and I go to the MAP trend data, and because we've chosen elementary before, I'll just choose middle school this time. 8th grade, what this will do, oh, thank you, district. What it will do is it will show us that same trend line of the percentage of students who are proficient on that assessment, proficient on the state assessment. And just like all of the other data sets, you have the ability to add on or ask, how did certain groups or demographic groups do on that assessment? What you will notice on the made yearly growth piece is that is something that we added since our new strategic plan. So we are going back in time to fill in that data. Soon this will be filled in as well. So we will have that information. But we need to go back into multiple years of data to be able to create that growth pattern for our students. Then the building trend data. What this is a set of data that is available to everyone in our community, but is used a lot at our buildings as they go through their continuous improvement process. For example, if we would choose an elementary school for math in grade 3, what they will get is that same data set, but instead in a graphical format, they get it in a grid with the number of students, the percentage proficient, and then on the far right, a comparison to the district. On this data set, you'll see there are many that say NA, and the reason for that is anything that has a number of students less than 10, we do not show that data because we do not want to single out a student or a small group of students moving forward. And that's consistent with other data reports that we provide. And then that was the aligned to the old standards. If we go to align to the new standards with MAP, and we choose that same data set, district 8th grade reading, now you'll see there's only one data point. And that's because that assessment is new, and the state assessment was new. So we just began that process with that winter 16 assessment of alignment. So that would be the measures of academic progress, the data that is available to our community and to our staff. Finally, the last data sets that I wanted to show you would be our state assessment And just like MAP, there are two different links, one that says prior to the new standards, one that says aligned to the new. The data is going to be very similar here. You can find the Learn More that says that the state assessment is given to all students in grades 3 through 8 and grade 11. It also says that we give a science assessment to students in grades 4, 8, and 11. And that is just information for people who are not familiar with the assessment. I could then go to the trend data, choose the district, and let's just choose 4th grade. And just the same way, we wanted to make all of the data sets similar. So once I got the format of one, I understand the format of all. So I see the percent who are proficient on that state assessment by year. This is in mathematics on the right side and reading on the left. And just like the others, I can begin to say, show me those students who might be limited English proficient and not. So people could ask those questions and get that information. When we go finally to the last data set that I wanted to just draw your attention to, aligned to the new standards, similar to the MAP assessment, once I get into that spot, what we will see is there is a limited number of data points because that is a new assessment. One thing that we'll need to watch as we look at the state assessment is there is groups across the state who are working on reviewing, potentially refining or renewing some of our state standards. And then with that might come another new assessment, which then would cause us to begin to talk about, now are there 3 entry points to get into that state assessment data. But from there, I just wanted to provide you an overview of where that data is provided, the type of data that we collect across the system, and then maybe I'll stop here before I get into building initiatives, see if there are questions, and then I'd like to show you some ways that this data is being used at the building level to help our students be more and more successful.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Gross, I'm just curious, if at some point in time there's a successful initiative to change the North Dakota standards, how would that be worked through in the school district level? If say that ever did happen or when it would?
Part of our strategic plan talks about, we have laid out in teaching and learning a scorecard around standards-based instruction that really walks through, if you start with a new set of standards, what do you do next? Which we would then begin to talk about unpacking them or pulling them apart to say, what do they really mean for both the students and the staff? We would then do that. We would move into an alignment piece with the current materials that we have. Do our materials allow us to teach those standards? And then from there, it would move into different assessments that we already have in place, our formative assessments and summative pieces. And then finally, it would be into what additional professional development we might need for our staff. So we've laid out that process in our scorecard, which is part of our strategic plan.
Anyone else? Dr. Schatz?
One of the things about the new state assessment that we had last year and this year, so we'll load up this year's data points, that assessment will be given again next year as they look at the standards and then possibly rewrite a new assessment. And so the challenge will be is we'll have 3 years of data to look at this current set eventually. But if it changes again, then you start over from scratch basically when you start to look at trend data. So you can look at cohort data, and I think that's something that we're trying to do more and more, and that is to take a group of kids from first grade as they move through the system and look at growth models, because that's what we really want to look at, is that cohort model versus just this one lump sum model of, you know, how's a grade doing or how's the district doing, because that kind of data really doesn't give you that drill down data where teachers then can make determinations about adjustments to the curriculum and things that they need to do with kids. And what Bob pointed out with the reading assessment, you know, that's really critical so that those teachers can group those kids. If you ever go into the elementary rooms and watch them do the reading instruction, they're grouping kids into their ability group levels so that they can refine that lesson for those students. The beauty of what we have now is that we have a warehouse where all of our data is being loaded into. And now we can really start using that data, not only for public presentations and for people to see and to see how we're doing, but also for teachers in their daily work. And many of you have seen that when you've gone out to the schools. And so it's very exciting tonight to be able to show you how this is starting to play out after a year and the load up of all this information. So just wanted to state that.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So then, how do we use that data in the buildings to make a difference in the lives of the students that we have the opportunity to serve? Wanted to share 3 different examples. And again, these are just examples of many things that are going on across our system. And many of these are being replicated in multiple buildings. So by singling out a building, it wasn't to say that they are doing more or less. Just examples for you to see and hear. One of them would be at McKinley. And their initiative centered more around attendance. And what they did is they started with a data set that they had a large number of students who had more than 12 total absences, tardies, or being late in the school year. And as a building team, they began to do their research around, okay, so what does that mean when it comes back to student achievement and growth? And what they found is that there's a very high correlation between school attendance and academic performance. In fact, in some research it says it's near the top of one of the greatest causes for poor performance and achievement. And then you can see the bulleted list of other research that they found. That the reason for that is because learning is a progression of skills, and if you have a hole in that progression, it's very difficult to fill that back in. That reading and doing the homework is only part of that, but it's really the conversations and the deep discussions and that just on-the-spot help that the teacher provides. So it's those types of things that they looked at. So then they came up with their plan, which was a combination of communication for parents, education for parents, and really making it a priority for the staff of how we're going to talk with the students and with parents when issues of attendance arise. So they created newsletters and letters, and they came up with a system in which when a student reached a certain number, there was a call from a counselor as a reminder. And then when we got to the next level, there was a call from a principal, and they made that part of the meetings that they had with the parents. And through that school year, what they were able to do is they were able to increase by 8% the number or the percentage of students who had less than those 12 tardies. And from the additional data that's there, in last school year, there were fewer days absent, fewer days late. So using the data, doing the research, coming up with a plan, and then seeing that the results were making a difference. And then the hope is, because that connection to that correlation between attendance and academic performance, that we will see that as we continue through this process. Another example is at the middle school at Carlin Eielson, where they looked at literacy. They looked at the data that you just saw, and they saw that many of the students, or a percentage of their students, were not proficient on the measures of academic progress. So they did their research, and they said, what can we do to make a difference? And in our district, we had already set up professional development through our Teach to Learn system, where teachers could come and learn additional skills and so on. But as a building, they said, we're going to make that for all. So all of the language arts instructors received professional development by Steve Dunn. And that plan really looked at that PD for all and focusing in on how do I, as an instructor, use the skill of what's called gradual release. Basically, I'm first as a teacher, I'm going to do that for you, and I'm going to show you that new strategy. For example, writing an introductory paragraph. But not only show you, I'm going to talk it through. What is my thinking that I'm doing as I'm going through each of those different steps, so that the students can hear from an expert what it is as they go through that. Then from the I do it, we'll do that together. So the class will continue that skill to the point where small groups of students are working in partners, all the way down then finally to I'm going to assign something very similar. So by that time, that student had multiple opportunities to have that guidance than support through that process. In addition, this training talked about building vocabulary and other skills and how to edit and revise. And through that professional development, when their building looked at their data, what they saw was this. That group of students, as 7th graders moved to 8th graders, you can see the categories of novice through advanced, and the novice and partially proficient, both of those percentages decreased, what we would hope we would see. The proficient and the advanced grew, and grew very large, again, what we hope we would see. And when I asked Mr. Larson, the principal there, what's the one big takeaway that you see through this initiative in your building? He said 100% of our language arts teachers are talking the same language. So as a kid moves from one classroom to the next, it's a natural progression for them. So again, another way of looking at that data that we looked at on the portal, putting it into action, and at the building level, making a difference for the students that we serve. And then finally, the last building initiative I want to share with you is at Davies High School. And they were looking at failing grades. The data that they had was they were concerned, alarmed, that there were too many students who were ending a quarter or a semester with a failing grade. So they did their research, and they said, what can we do differently? They talked to other schools, they looked at other districts, they did their reading, and really they came up with 3 different things. One, the multi-tier system of support, and that's really a district initiative, so they wanted to support and continue that. They wanted to develop a testing center for students who may have missed a test or a quiz, but the piece I wanted to talk about is they created what they called their support system for academics. And really what that was, their plan was, let's catch students early, provide them the support that they need, contact the parents, and then help those students be as successful as possible. And it was a 3-tier approach. The first tier was at 3 weeks after the quarter started, any student who was below 65% in a class, that teacher made contact with the parent, they recorded that in PowerSchool, they talked with the student, and they tried to set up those individual work sessions either before or after school. Week and a half later at midterm, if that student still was below that 65% in that class, there was that second log entry in PowerSchool. The administrator now called that parent, so now it went from the teacher to the administrator, and then the parent and the principal talked about moving a student from an open period into a structured study hall. And that structured study hall at Davies happens Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, where there is a math teacher and a language arts teacher and a science teacher to help students with the work that they needed. As they progressed through that, then at the end of the quarter, what happened is students who were below that 65% now were placed into the ILC program with parent consent, and that is a 5-day-a-week program now, ratcheting up the support. But those students who were able to accumulate more points, move past that 65% mark, they graduated out and they had their open period again. This is something that's being done at all 3 high schools. I just chose Davies as an example. And the data is pretty interesting. The red line there shows before they started the program, and you can see the number of failing grades and how that is progressively getting smaller and smaller semester after semester and each year. So again, using the data, doing the research, coming up with the plan of continuous improvement, putting it in place, and empowering the staff to make a difference in the lives of the students they serve. So as we talk about Result 1, or Strategic Initiative 1, Student Achievement and Growth, I think you can see from the district level, we have a portal that's developed to collect that data. We also then have buildings actively using that information to come up with ways that they as a team can creatively solve some of these issues. So
That's great. Paul?
Dr. Gross, would you say that it would be fair in reviewing this, which is what we were just doing, the student achievement and growth monitoring, that most of the effort is spent on bringing the people who are at the troubled end of the spectrum, the lower end of the spectrum, up above that bar level, and not so much effort spent on the people who are already above the bar level, continuing to make them improve?
I would say that we are attempting to do all. And as we looked at our growth model, as we talked about students who we want them all to make 1 year of growth. And that's why we talked about some students might start below, some might start at, and some might start above. All of those students should make that year of growth wherever they're at. And that's why on many of those data charts was the left-hand side, that percentage of growth for all. We have purposely taken our gifted and talented program that we have at the elementary and woven that into our multi-tier system of support. So as teams are coming together to talk about students and what their needs are, it's not just students who need a little bit more because they're struggling. It might be those who need a little bit more because they are already there. I also think the gifted and talented teachers that we have in all of our elementaries, and then as we begin to talk about the middle school and the different courses that we provide for our students, and then at the high school level with our wide array of advanced placement and more challenging courses, I think we are attempting to solve or work with all students.
Did that answer your question?
You know, it's just that when I was watching this, I saw most of the effort being directed at the people who are below the bar. But you've told me qualitatively that no, we're also directing effort at those who are above the bar. So if that's the case, that's good. I would, small follow-up on that. Are we still focusing most of our gifted and talented efforts towards the elementary? Is that more and more being integrated into middle? And have we touched the bar at all in the secondary?
I would say the majority of our staff who are gifted and talented teachers are at the elementary, but we do at the middle level have multiple opportunities, for example, in mathematics. So a student who is gifted in mathematics may not take the 7th grade math, they may take that advanced math. So we have staff who are dedicated for that. We have some students who may take an algebra as an 8th grade student. We also have gifted and talented teachers who are at the middle school who then work with the teams to help them differentiate the lessons that they have in the different areas. And then at the high school, again, our wide and very large program of study for both your typical classes, but then your higher end classes and AP.
John?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Gross, I'm just curious, with your attendance analysis at McKinley, for example, to what degree do you go or accumulate information as to what contributes to a lack of attendance or diminished attendance, and then how, and I'm curious what you're finding, and then how that affects your action plan?
I think that's why you saw in that plan and many of the other plans across the district, it's the call from the counselor, it's the call from the principal, it's a call from the teacher to find out what are some of those underlying factors. Because no student is the same, no reason is the same of why that might be causing some of those issues. And then it's an individual case-by-case situation as we work with the families. So we may look then to connect our social workers. We may look to connect some other resources in the community to help.
Thank you. Dr. Schatz, you had some thoughts?
Well, I just wanted to try to bring full circle the whole thing here that we've talked about tonight, because as you watch what we're trying to do by aligning everything that we do to the strategic plan with very specific initiatives, goals, and then ways to measure, also align directly then to our budget. Because if you want to say how are you spending your money, well, MTSS, multiple tier support system, then aligns with things like individual learning centers, support staff, and others who are helping them to do the things that we need to do with kids to get them caught up. Paul, I would say at the high school level, we have provided much higher opportunities for students to engage in rigorous courses than we have in assisting students to graduate for those kids who do not perform well when they get through that 9th grade year. And so by doing what we're doing now with the multiple tier support system and aligning our ILCs, individual learning centers, with very specific types of activities like you saw here, we're now able to really specifically address those academic deficiencies. But the advanced placement program that we have in our school district, the amount of level of rigor and overall course selection for students is beyond approached by any other district. And so we do quite a bit. And if you wanted to quantify that from a budgetary standpoint, I think that we would find that we are spending far more in that area than we are in the other areas of ILCs and support services. Now, having said that, that does not include ELL programs and special education programs. But we're talking about all those kids who fall between those cracks of those kids who take those higher level rigorous courses and those kids who qualify for services in those other programs. And so by doing what we're doing, we've filled that gap. And so I think we brought it full circle now, very specifically.
Just to get back to that, Dr. Schatz, because wouldn't it be true, and I'm not complaining about this or saying we're not doing it, but gifted and talented has been an area that I've looked at for 15 years and tried to help that progress along. And would it not be true that most of our high school effort towards gifted and talented, maybe not all of it, but most of it, is organized around the concept of, hey, you've got these advanced classes you can take. And so it almost becomes a student-driven seeking of additional, in other words, if you're in the 10th grade and you say, well, I'm going to take the math class that's normally taught in the 12th grade, you could do that. But it isn't that we necessarily have a program designed for that, and maybe we do. I don't know. But
I would say that happens very particularly in language arts and in math with the teachers. The teachers are working with the kids all the time, recommending to students. If we have a math teacher in the 9th grade who sees a student who's just a high flyer, they're talking to that student, their parent, and they're saying, hey, we need to get you into calculus, we need to get you into the upper level courses. And then we're looking at, okay, what happens when they get to 11th and 12th grade and we don't have the courses anymore? Can we connect them up with a college course? Can we do something online? Those types of things. So a lot of that's happening internally with teachers and with the counselors. Our upper level teachers are meeting all the time talking about those kids and making sure they're counseling those students. And so that effort's gone on for years, and it's been a very good effort. But again, where we've fallen short is for those kids who fall between those cracks. There's really been nothing very specifically. And that's why I've been a big proponent at the secondary level for strategically looking at the academic deficiencies of those students and using strategies to help those students become better learners. Because it's not about the content at that time of the course that they're taking. It's about the fact that they, in their learning abilities, have some kind of deficiency. And those very specific strategies will help address that so that when they go back to the classroom, they can better understand the content and the teachers now can continue to work with those students. And that's the whole purpose between the ILCs and what you see Davies is doing, very specific instruction for those students.
And so where I tend to notice it is I tend to notice that for the lower end students, we have lots of data-driven information. We have lots of things that are specific programs and so on. Whereas for the upper end students, we tend to have a qualitative statement that says, well, we're doing a lot in this area and they're meeting with them. Not to say we aren't, but I notice the earlier part is more data-driven. Hey, we have these tests, we have these evaluations, we have these special teachers lined up to do this. They're going to get more sessions of reading. And with the upper level, it's a bit more qualitative. Would that be probably correct?
Well, actually, we have quantitative information there too. When you look at our advanced placement courses, we do track the test scores that students take, and we do have that data that shows that the majority of our students engage in advanced placement courses that take the test. We have over 88% of those kids score 3 or higher on that test. And so what that says is that that's a very rigorous program where the instruction is working because those students are successful in taking those tests. If you were to look at the ACT, the challenge we have with the ACT is they used to break it out as core and non-core scores. And core score meant that kids were taking courses that were rigorous enough to prepare them to go on to college and be successful. Now what we've done with every student taking it in the state is they lump it into one score. So you have some students who are taking what we call non-core courses. They're taking general courses. They're not interested in the rigorous courses. And when you looked at those core courses of those kids, you could find that the majority of those kids were scoring much higher than the other groups of kids. And so that means that we are doing a pretty good job preparing those students. And so there's a lot of ways to break that out. We can't provide you all that tonight. I mean, we could spend 3, 4, 5 hours on a presentation on every single corner of this. What this is just a snapshot into it. And so what you saw tonight was right, was the ILCs, the MTSS. But we do have those other data points, and we do track those. I will tell you, the Fargo Public Schools Advanced Placement Program accounts for over 1/3 of the entire state's enrollment in AP courses. It is the most robust program in the state, if not in a lot of the other states that surround us. And so we should be very proud of that. And that does provide that advanced experience for those students.
And that's a great point, Dr. Schatz, that it would be wonderful if the public realized that better. I don't know how we communicate it, but the concept that one district accounts for, what did you say, a third?
1/3 of the entire.
1/3 of the entire state AP work tells you that we're seeking a higher bar rather than sometimes we believe the state would like us to seek the lower bar.
You're exactly right. We are providing more opportunities for students to engage in more rigorous academic experiences to better prepare them to be ready for college or whatever they want to do when they leave us than most anybody else. And we know that through our standard of efforts comparisons too. And so that comes at a cost. And what I know now, and what we should know now, is that we can align this directly to our budget. We can look at our strategic plan, we can go through all these things, and we can say, where do we spend our dollars? And I can tell you, Bob and Rachel can go through that, and they can say, the professional development that we provide for our teachers so that they're able to do what they're doing at Carl Van Eielson comes at a cost, and here's what it costs. And that's why we spend the money there, because we know the end game is that when teachers are better prepared, we see 17% increase in overall student achievement. When we added Amy Riccio with the graduation dropout issue, and she's very specifically working with that process. Last year alone, we had 19 less dropouts. So we're spending our dollars where we know they're making a difference, and we can break that out very specifically. My last comment on this is that if you notice with the strategic plan, it goes full circle. You go from strategic initiative number 1, that goes into all the different things that we do academically, and then we have a couple of other strategic initiatives that do that. But you go all the way to the end and you look at strategic initiative number 7. So how do we assess that and continue to improve? Well, one of the major improvement areas that they're asking us to take a look at is to assess these programs to see how effective they are, and to assess the assessments we're using to see if in fact we're doing the right ones and we're using it correctly, or are we just wasting our time? So we'll engage more in that process. And so it comes full circle. The beauty of it is that it's a full circle type process, and it's a living document. It keeps breathing and working with us, and now we can put it all in one place on a dashboard. And so tonight, that was just a piece of the power of what we have going for us now. So.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes, David.
Thank you, Madam President. Dr. Gross, what percentage of our graduating students take the ACT?
We have, every student in the state needs to take the ACT, or they take the Work Keys assessment. I can find the percentage before the end of the evening. I would hate to give you the wrong data.
All students, all seniors have to take the ACT?
It's grade 11. Right.
That's mandated by the state, right?
That was put in place by state legislature a few years ago, where all students in grade 11 would have to take the ACT, and therefore the state funds that. And so students get one shot free. And then if they choose not to take the ACT, they can take the Work Keys. But I would say you're going to find that it's a very high percentage of our kids that take the ACT. Now, if they choose to take it again in their senior year, a lot of kids will take it twice, then that's on their own. And so our district score that we get then is that holistic score of those juniors. But then you also, if you're a high school principal, you'll get scores in your school of those other kids who might have taken it as a senior. So you sometimes get 2 or 3 different reports, depending on when they took it and when those reports become available. But primarily, kids are doing that so that they have that score so that they can apply to college. Those kids that take it 2 or 3 times. But where the difference was is that in the past, we didn't have all those kids that were in the non-core curriculum taking the ACT. So when you start having all kids take of all ability levels, it naturally brings the score down.
I think the average score was like around 23, wasn't it? Somewhere in there. Is there any tracking data of the kids that actually go to college, what their scores were? The average of theirs?
We do not have that. The difficulty is as we try to share data amongst systems. So it would have to be from the institution themselves that might have that data set of what their incoming freshman's average score would be.
from some of the statistics I've heard from State Superintendent Baszler, the percentage of our students that would have taken it, whether it was required or not, was about 26.2. The last time I heard it, but that was about 2 years ago. So our district does, and state, at least state, outperform the national average greatly.
Anyone else? Well, Dr. Schatz and Dr. Gross, thank you so much for updating this on this and giving us a more detailed look at how that all works and fits together. Appreciate that. We are now at our consent agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve those items.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye. All
Aye.
opposed, same. Thank you. Our business items tonight, we start with a short one, assignment of the canvassing committee. So as stated in our policies, executive committee members not serving as officers will canvass the board to see who is willing to serve in the role of president or vice president. So those people would be Jim, Rebecca, and Robin. And Jim, would you be willing to chair that? Thank you. And you know what you need to do. Appreciate you doing that. Kind of your last specific task. Yeah, it's still loading work on you. You're not done yet. Thank you. Then our ELs. Jennifer, was she ever able to, I didn't hear anything.
Do not believe she's on, no.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments they wish to add to their written comments? Rebecca?
I just have a question. Do we have to vote on the canvassing committee?
No, that's an appointment.
Yeah, nor do you have a choice. So thank you for accepting that. Anyone have any comments on the EL? Even though Jennifer's not here, and I kind of wish to respond to her, normally I wouldn't, but this was something so specific, I thought maybe someone else would have a question as well. When she mentioned a specific meeting, it's on page 5, it says, I think the board should have been invited to attend Kirsten Baszler's informational meeting at South. Additionally, she talked about the GAC committee weighing in and deciding who should have met. Let me just give you a little bit of context for that. I was called or messaged by Senator Flacco wanting to meet with 3 members of our GAC committee. And I said, well, then we'll need to give public notice. And they were not interested in that because I said that would be fine with me. And then they just asked to meet with me as president of the board. So I guess out of their preference that it not be the whole board or a quorum of a board. So that was the context for that. Anybody have any other questions or comments? Jim?
I'd like to make a motion that we accept memo number 131 on monitoring report for EL 10.
Anne Marie, would you call the roll, please?
Nelson,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Strand,
Yes.
Goldenberg,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Boyd.
Yes. Motion is carried. Then going on to EL 7, we had a request to look at the wording, and this came out of our EL monitoring. So if you look at the changes suggested to number 4, it just aligns our evaluation with what information that we're given. So it makes that EL make more sense to evaluate it. Any questions about that? Robin?
I move that we approve policy EL7 as presented.
Second? Is there a second? Second. Oh, sorry, didn't hear. Anne Marie, please.
Paulson,
Yes.
Strand,
Yes.
Goldenberg,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yes, motion carries. Thank you. So we have our budget for 16-17 for your consideration. Jim, will you take us through that? Yeah, sure. It's probably good timing. We'll be back at 6:37. We'll resume our session here. And so, Jim, if you would take us through the budget, please.
I sure will. First, I'd like to just float out an idea and see which direction the board would like to handle this. I could go through all of the individual budgets and we could take an action at the end on all of them. Or if the board would prefer, we can look at each one and take action after each one.
Do any board members have a thought, preference? John?
Madam Chair, not that it matters, but I'd prefer individually so we can keep our focus on each unit.
Okay, that's what we'll do. Anybody else have any other suggestions? First voice carries it. That's what we'll do. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn your attention to what is referred to as Special Assessment Fund. That'll be the first one we go through. As I think you're all aware of, this is a separate mill authority that we have to collect dollars to pay special assessments that the district faces in conjunction with being a property owner. We started levying 1 mill for special assessments last year. It is planning's recommendation that we continue without an increase at that 1 mill level. And as you can see from the draft 27-15 Special Assessment Fund budget, we believe that will bring us total revenue next year of $371,779. And we will then expend those funds in a particular order to try to eliminate as many of the current specials or specials that we will soon have certified against our property in conjunction with Ed Clapp. So at least at this point in time, if we approve this budget, the order of checkoff, I guess, in terms of removing specials from our property will be first approximately $180,000 that will be used to clear the special assessment that is connected to the apartment building property that is right in front of the Ed Clapp School. Part of the agreement that got us the ability to put that road in was an agreement with the city that the school district would pick up the apartment building share of the specials on that road, since they didn't need the road, but we did. And the city would take care of the specials that would be associated to the church, who also didn't need the road, but we did. So that will be approximately $180,000. The next thing that we would be paying down would be the remaining specials on our Ed Clapp property itself. And that's a shared site with the park board. We don't have an exact figure quite yet. That's still getting worked out between our team, which is primarily headed up by Brock, and the park district. But we're estimating that will be in the neighborhood of approximately 1.2 million split between the entities. And then finally, any remaining amount that we might have, because we obviously are starting with a fund balance, would be applied to our specials over at the Blue Stem Center. And we would estimate that we'll probably be able to take out about 78 to 80,000 of those specials. And I think the total specials on that property currently are in the neighborhood of about 400,000. But that is a long-term special assessment, and it's part and parcel with some other discussions that are going on or will be going on between our administrative team and the city of Moorhead to address some of the other long-term needs out at the Blue Stem Center, in particular permanent parking. So with that, I take any questions anybody has on the Special Assessment Fund, and of course, if I don't have the answer to them, we're going to turn to our business manager.
Any questions on the Special Assessment Fund? Robin?
Is there anything else that we can pay off in advance like we have in the past, or is Ed Clapp the only remaining?
This is the only list we have right now. We do anticipate we'll see other specials coming up from probably some of the work over at Eagles and other just work that happens at different parts of the city, road repairs, sewer infrastructure repairs, where specials get assessed. But at this point in time, those are the only ones we're aware of.
Thanks.
I'd like to forward a motion on behalf of planning then to approve the special assessment fund. Draft budget of 2017 is provided in our packet.
Second?
Is there any discussion? Anne Marie?
Strand,
Yes.
Goldenberg,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yes. Building fund.
Thank you. I'd turn you over to, I think it's the next budget document in your packet, if you've left them in order. And it should say at the top, Fargo Public School District 1 Building Fund, Draft 2017. Just for clarity, we have actually two parts that in the old days we called our building fund. This is the state statutory 15 mills that we are allowed to collect for building purposes. The voters had also approved additional millage authority to Fargo Public Schools for building purposes. I think back prior to the opening of Discovery, if I'm not mistaken. And that's a separate budget that we'll look at following this one. So this one just relates to the 15 mills that we levy for the building fund itself. And as you can see, based upon the projected growth numbers that we have gotten from the city, we are anticipating that for 2016-17, we will be seeing approximately an increase of about, 470,000, I guess, more or less, in terms of total property taxes collected on this budget. We are estimating that based upon all of our expenditures, and keep in mind we have a number of bond issues that played out in the last year for projects that are still in the works. So it looks like we have a very, very significant fund balance here. And in fact, we do at this moment in time. But we have several major projects that are going to have bills still coming through this calendar year that'll close out on June 30th, and then certainly will come to fruition in the coming school calendar year. In particular, the Eagles Center, or the Eagles Elementary, but also the Operations Center. And we had a refunding bond issue that's also tied in that kind of artificially, temporarily inflated the fund balance on this particular account. So you'll notice, we think we're gonna end the year with a fund balance here of approximately $20,791,000, but by the time the dust settles at year end next year, we would anticipate that number to be closer to 2.6 million. And that's really just the timing of the bonds we let or the bonds we refunded versus the paying off of the refunded bonds and the paying off of those construction contracts. So we are putting forward an estimated total revenue package here of approximately $8,128,219 in revenue, expenditures equaling that number. So we are really not anticipating any positive growth in this fund balance, in that we are going to actually use funds out of the building fund to take care of some of the operational maintenance issues, and we'll see some of that when we talk about the general fund a little bit later on. We had excess capacity above and beyond the debt service that this fund is used for, and based upon decisions the board had made previously, the administration is going to take care of some of next year's kind of one-ticket operational maintenance items out of the building fund as opposed to just using general fund for that. If there are any questions, we'll certainly be happy to address them.
Any questions? John?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the preliminary building fund budget as presented.
Second?
Any discussion? Anne Marie, please call the roll.
Goldenberg,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Strand,
Yes.
Boyd.
Yes. And the special levy fund is next. Okay.
Just by way of reference, we have 11.35 mils of authority that were granted by the voters, and that's really now been segregated out into a special levy fund as opposed to in the old days, we just combined it with the building fund. But at the end of the day, these dollars do the exact same thing that the building fund dollars do. We use them to service the interest and principal payments on the debt outstanding against the buildings throughout the district. It's anticipated again that we'll see a revenue increase in this particular budget. So we are projecting total revenue for the coming year at $3,803,131. At this point in time, the principal and interest payments that have been identified that will be expended out of this budget will be approximately $3 million, which will give us an excess revenue over expenditures of 803. But at the end of the day, that really gets married in with the building levy fund to create the total fund balance that we have, I guess, on the capital expenditure side of our budget. With that, I'd take any questions anybody may have.
Any questions? Brock?
Madam President, members of the board, not a question, but maybe a reminder. You may recall that the pending mill levy freeze does not apply to the special levy fund nor the building fund. It only applies to the general fund. So when Jim says there's an increase in revenue, the reason for that is we do realize the growth of the valuation growth and what that does to the mill impact in these particular funds. So I think we've talked about that before, but just a reminder so that you're all aware.
Thank you, exactly. Any other questions? Jim?
On behalf of planning, I'd like to move adoption of the special levy fund budget as provided in the packet.
Second.
Any discussion? Anne Marie?
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Strand,
Yes.
Goldenberg,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yes, motion carries. Nutrition services.
Thank you. Again, I'd reference you at the top to the document that says Nutrition Services Fund, Draft 2017. Based upon action previously taken this spring by the board to address meal prices, not just obviously for our students, but also for our staff, we bring you this budget, which is now projecting total revenue for the coming year at $6,054,900. Which is a slight increase over our revenue stream that was budgeted, a slight decrease over the revenue stream that was budgeted the previous year, but at this point in time is still above our actual year-to-date revenues, which again have not been closed out yet. So we would anticipate at the end of the day that this budget is actually going to be projecting revenue at about 3.31% less than our previous year budget did. On the expense side of things, we're anticipating a corresponding drop in our expenditures as well. Total fund expenditures budgeted for the coming year will be $6,463,329. And for those of you that don't want to really use a calculator, that really means we're anticipating spending $408,429 more than we're anticipating in revenue. So we will continue to spend down the district's overall fund balance as we offset the costs of providing our nutrition services program. You might recall from our discussions the game plan going forward, although we've only looked at a one-year increase, was to incrementally take steps over the next few years to try to get to where our revenue is taking care of all of our operating expenses. That certainly is not the case for the coming year. So we would be looking at overall an expenditure decrease of 3.74, a revenue decrease of 3.31 with this budget. But again, I believe the Nutrition Service Department, I know Brock and his team are comfortable that this is a doable situation for the coming year, and we'll kind of see where the dust settles and address this issue again a year from now to determine if we want to do another price increase on meal costs or not.
Thank
Any
you.
questions?
Thank you, Jim. Any questions? Great.
On behalf of planning then, I'd like to put forward approval of the Nutrition Services Fund as provided in your packet.
Second.
Any discussion? I'd just like to thank the board for their careful consideration of the meal prices and commodities and everything else that went into talking about this budget in weeks past. It makes tonight go nice and smoothly. Anne Marie?
Knutson,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Strand,
Yes.
Goldenberg,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yes. Now, this brings us to the fun part.
Well, it brings us to our general fund. One overview I forgot to do at the beginning, and I know all board members realize this, perhaps anybody in the public that's new to this process of how we go about certifying a budget to get it over to the county. We are taking preliminary approval today of these budgets, at least thus far, and hopefully including the general fund, which I'm about to get to. The board will have to revisit this again. Typically late August, early to mid-September. By then, of course, we will have actually closed out last calendar year, so in all of these documents, the actual expenditures for calendar year 2015-16 will be recorded and be to the penny. Right now, we still have bills outstanding, we still have revenues outstanding that are gonna still come in from the current budget year. So the board will revisit this again in the fall, at which time we do final approval of these budgets. It should be anticipated by board members that we may see slightly different recommendations coming back. We will have better enrollment numbers by that point in time. That might lead to either increase, I'm guessing, but potentially decreases in staffing based upon actual classroom needs. So all of those things will happen over the next couple of months, keeping Brock on his toes. So we may see some minor adjustments, and of course, if that happens, those will be highlighted, and we'll certainly discuss them at length when we come back for final approval, or for whoever comes back for final approval in the fall. So with that, let's take a look at our general fund budget. As Brock had alluded to, this is actually the fund that on a local level has now been frozen through the act of the legislature and will remain frozen on a local level, local revenue, until such time as the voters would approve otherwise. And you'll see that pretty plainly when you look at our first line, property tax. Our budgeted amount for the coming year is identical to what it was this current year. No increase whatsoever, because we're actually frozen at the dollar amount. And until such time as our mills would be down to 70, and then it would automatically unfreeze absent any action by the voters prior to that. The increase in state foundation aid is reflected in this budget, and I don't know that number off the top of my head. I want to say it's just a shade under $10,000 per ADM next year, if I'm not mistaken.
9646.
Thank you, Brock. 9646. And again, ADM is not a student headcount number. It is students in a seat based upon weighted factors for their particular risk categories they may be in. So our ADM number will get calculated based upon the end attendance for the spring, and that will then be applied to the per pupil aid formula, and that is projected under the state revenue. You see some federal revenue, very little, because grants actually show up in a different process and don't require approval at this point in time. Total increase in projected revenue we're looking at for next year in our general fund is 1.08%. So very, very slight increase in the overall general fund with a projected budget of $145,753,601. On the expense side, as I know everybody on the board is well aware of, staff probably accounts for close to 80+% of our overall general fund expenditures. But you see each of the categories is broken out separately. First, salary expenses, followed by benefits. Then we go to purchase services, operating and repair expenses, transportation and travel expenses, supplies and materials, land and equipment, and then finally miscellaneous expenses and ultimately some fund transfers. For a total estimated expense side exactly equal to our revenue side, a balanced budget of $145,753,601. So we are anticipating, if this budget is approved, we will not be needing to use any, at least at this point in time, of our remaining fund balance. And just as a reminder to the board, we took action earlier this spring to basically prepay a couple of one-time expenditures, one for a interest and principal payment on a bond, and also for some technology replacement, so that we could adapt to get to this balanced budget point. So we actually did spend down some fund balance dollars. This particular report, and again I want to caution you, shows a fund balance number that, number one, is not accurate because we're not at year end yet, and number two, is also inflated by the fact that we have dollars that we took in bonding that actually will come back out in the coming year. So with that, I'll take any questions on the general fund or ask for approval.
Any questions? John?
Madam Chair, I'll move preliminary approval of the general fund budget as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Thank you, Jim, for walking us through that. Anne Marie, please.
Myers,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Strand,
Yes.
Goldenberg,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yes, motion carried. Thank you. Yes.
If you just indulge me, I personally want to, on behalf of the planning committee, and I think I speak for the entire board, Brock, want to extend my thanks and gratitude to you, and I hope you will take that back to your entire team. There are lots and lots of folks behind the scenes that have worked on these budgets really for the entire year to get us to this point. And while I have the good fortune of presenting them, I am not taking credit for the work that created them. And I know Brock wouldn't take that credit either because it's a team effort. And thank you.
Thank you, Brock. There is a letter from North Dakota CEO, the educational professionals coming around. That's just correspondence, just for your, just for you to review, take a look at. Committee reports. Dinah, can we start on your side this time?
Okay, so since the last meeting, I attended the Woodrow graduation just as a guest, and because I always think that's a really special event, and I presented diplomas at North High. I forgot to mention last time that the Public Health Board meeting was previously, and one thing I wanted to make you aware of, some of you may be aware that there's an initiative out there to get signatures to get on the November ballot and increase in tobacco prices for cigarettes and any other tobacco products. You may know that in the past, the legislature has tried, or there have been folks who've tried to get that passed in the legislature, and it hasn't passed. North Dakota is one of the lowest taxed tobacco products in the country. So there's a movement out there to have it a ballot on the November election for all of the voters to vote for. So there's an organization called Raise It for Health Coalition that's out there trying to get signatures. So I would encourage you to sign it if you're given the opportunity so that it gets on the ballot. But for just a little more information, if this passes, the proposal is, sorry, I don't have the actual amount, I thought I did, that they want to increase the tax. But whatever the new revenue, if this passes, on the tobacco products would be divided evenly between the Veterans Trust Fund and the Community Health Trust Fund. And of the amount in the Community Health Trust Fund of particular interest, I think, to this group is that 70% of that would be designated to mental health, substance abuse comprehensive plans. So in light of what's going on in Fargo as well as across the state, and the country for that matter, Fargo Cast Public Health is in support of getting this initiative on the ballot for November. So there will be some stuff coming out from the board publicly supporting this. So I wanted you to be aware of that, and also if you have the opportunity, I encourage you to sign the ballot or sign the petition to get it on the ballot.
Thank you, Dinah. Robin?
Governmental Affairs Committee will not meet this month. However, we have some items that will be brought forth at the retreat for board discussion and decide where to go from there. Handed out diplomas at North High, and I figured out I have handed out 13 years in a row at North High, which I think means that the kindergartners, when they started on the board, I handed them their graduating diplomas. So it dawned on me when I said, and I didn't even cry, unlike this board meeting. So other than that, I think that's it.
Great, thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
Paul?
I got to attend by phone anyway, the governance meeting we had recently. And also I had a chance before the school year was out to attend a retirement event at Carl Ben Eielson, which was just a really well done and great time. And hopefully was kind of gives me an idea of some of the great things that will happen in future years as far as district-sponsored retirement events that won't necessarily replace the individual school ones, but anyway, it was a good time there and a lot of good people there. And I don't know if any other board members were there before I got there, but it was a treat to be there. And I think they really they seem to anyway really appreciate having a board member there to attend. And then I also got to hand out diplomas at Davies. I'd like to say it was the 13th time I'd handed it there, but you might see through that. But anyway, it was great to see those kids, and having watched them grow up from the first year they were there till now, that was a treat.
Thank you, Paul. David?
I was with Paul at the Davies graduation.
We did a great job together.
We were wonderful.
Thank you. Rebecca?
I handed out diplomas at Souths, and it was rather a treat to get a big hug from my son when he crossed the stage. So, any rate, and last year I handed them out at South as well. So, that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. John?
Couple things, Madam Chair. I always preferred Woodrow for diplomas, but this year I had an emergency that drew me out of town, so I missed that opportunity, and I'm not sure, did you cover for me, Dinah, or?
I was just sitting in the audience. I
Okay.
didn't know you weren't coming, so.
Jennifer did.
Jennifer
was
did,
there.
all right, well, thank Jennifer for me. On another report, the Native American Commission is working through some interesting logistics with all these different timelines. We just had a meeting the first Thursday of the month, and they have the city-appointed timelines, the school-appointed timelines, some people who are on 4-year terms and things like this, and how that fits into timelines, and their own timeline of when they appoint their own new officers. So they're just in a pickle, trying to figure out with vacancies and with schedules and bylaws and so on how they proceed for this moment after with different things going on. So that was an interesting process, at some point, the new president of this board will be making a new appointment there. And it's, of course, been my favorite appointment in all these years.
Well, it's been fun hearing your reports on the commission. That's great, thank you. Jim?
Well, planning met. Obviously, we spent a fair amount of time on the budget, but we also did a little bit of work as directed by the board in terms of the health insurance committee. I think we had one other topic too, but I didn't bring my minutes with me, so, but it didn't require any action at this point in time, I know that.
Preparation for the discussion at the retreat on mill levy actions and future.
Yeah. So we think we're ready for that, or at least Brock will be ready for it. We also had a state school board, a board meeting since we last met. Kind of an interesting time over there as well. We focused quite a bit on the interim committee work going on. But it also appears that the leadership at that organization is going to be changed this fall, as typically the vice president becomes the president, but the vice president is stepping down from the state school board. He may be stepping down from his local school board too, I'm not sure. So I suspect I'll know tomorrow who the candidates for president and vice president of that organization will be, based upon the outcomes of whatever is happening right now at the ballot box. At this point in time, we are not anticipating having a planning meeting prior to the next reorganization meeting. But if something does come up, Brock has already been given the green light to let us know if he needs planning to get back together. But we think we've got all of the work done that was requested of us, or at least getting done for the retreat. So I'm not anticipating planning will be having a July planning committee meeting. But that could change depending upon what Brock uncovers as he's getting all the data put together for us. And I think that's it.
Great, thank you. I also handed out diplomas. These are the GED diplomas, and that was held at Woodrow, which was fantastic. Governance committee met, and in addition to the EL adjustment that we approved tonight, we talked over the agenda items for both the board planning session and the board retreat coming up in July. As a follow-up to that, Rebecca and Anne Marie and I met this afternoon to talk about the communications piece of that and kind of planning out what we're going to do. Along with Dr. Schatz and Brock, met with Mayor Tim Mahoney of Fargo and also Craig Whitney, head of the chamber, just to start letting them know where we're at in this financial planning process and in the mill levy process, and that we'll be coming to them for some sort of formal declaration of support for that. And we've just had terrific experiences and great feedback. So I thank Dr. Schatz. He's been having many more meetings on his own too. So kind of quietly laying the groundwork and just getting a sense of where more formal support may be. And it's just great to hear such positive feedback from our community leaders. So that's been really enjoyable. You have my report, and I have nothing to add besides that.
President Boyd,
Yes.
could we draw the board's attention to the list of upcoming dates on the front? Those have been updated, so they may want to review that on their
Oh.
calendars.
Okay.
The City Park School Joint Meeting has been tentatively scheduled for September 28th, so if you could please note that in your calendars. Also, we have scheduled for next fall the State of the Schools Address and Public Focus Groups date of November 3rd. Obviously, more details will come on that, but if you guys want to look over that whole list and make sure your calendars are up to date, that'd be great.
Great, thank you for noting those additions. And the State of the Schools Address, that is something new. It's going to be somewhat on the order of the Fargo North public engagement session that we had that you may recall. Paul?
Well, as long as we're talking about dates, I wanted to point out that on our agenda for tonight, if we didn't already mention that our next board meeting is scheduled for Sunday, June 26th. We got
I
that
was gonna
fixed.
call
Okay.
attention to that, thank you.
We're good. And for clarification, I know we've had some discussion about this at the governance meeting, but we're to be there at that meeting or not? I'm sorry, the future one in
Right.
July.
Correct. So next meeting, June 28th, for those of you who will be leaving the board, that will be your final meeting, and we'll have some recognition and so forth at that meeting. And the first meeting in July will be just the new board. So I think we discussed that at the last meeting and at governance.
Well, there was
too,
some
so-
discussion at governance and
Yeah.
actually a little bit of
I think I
disagreement about
announced it,
that.
and then we discussed it,
Yeah, I think it
yes.
was announced that this is accomplished, perhaps without discussion, and then there was some discussion, and it just seems like a change. And I know my comment was, someone said, well, the State School Board Association had said that it's not indicated that board members serve until that date or that they show up at that meeting, but it was also not contraindicated, but whatever. So I think we're still board members up until the 12th, or is that not correct?
If there is some sort of situation that arises, if we need to convene a committee, certainly it would be, the new board members are not seated until that first meeting in
Gotcha.
July. So if anything happens in between, but your final formal board meeting, assuming there are not any special meetings called in that intervening time. Thank you. And yes, to be clear, the next meeting date is June 28th. And are there any other reports?
Well, Madam Chair, I'm going to miss this role a lot, too. It's my favorite self-appointment. I wasn't at the last meeting due to something that rose at the last minute, but I would have, of course, and I always feel remiss if I overlook something, but we had Robin Nelson's birthday that I didn't get to put before you all on the 25th, and of our superintendent, Dr. Schatz, on June 8th, so now I'm caught up.
That was kind of unsettling that we didn't have our own recognized. And Jim, do you have any final words of wisdom to offer?
Plenty of time to get some door prizes.
Thank you. We're adjourned, and we'll see you again on the 28th.